Welcome to the first ever conference, Survivors Speak. It is so wonderful to be here this morning. It's so wonderful to see so many of you who've dedicated your lives to helping survivors of crime and stopping the cycle of violence, to dedicating your lives to improving community safety across the state of California. We have Los Angeles in the house. We've got the Central Valley here. San Diego, do we have San Diego? All right. The Bay Area. Sacramento too. So welcome. My name's Lenore Anderson, and I'm the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice. We're a statewide organization, and we're focused on improving community safety and reducing waste in California's criminal justice system. We're also the proud facilitators of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. You'll be hearing from the leadership from that statewide network throughout today and throughout the conference. And we're also proud to be sponsoring this conference today. I want to start off this morning, before we jump into our powerful first panel, I want to start off this morning by providing a little bit of context and just to give you a little bit of background about why we decided to organize this event today. As most of you know, California's justice system is in the midst of some pretty big changes. This calls on us to ask some fundamental questions about what kind of system we want for safety and justice in California. The nation entirely is shifting gears on criminal justice as well. It's not just California. But we see all of these changes in justice and safety policy as a huge opportunity to fundamentally rethink the assumptions that have built the old system, the assumptions about who crime survivors are and what crime survivors want, and start new to build a new approach to safety and justice that puts survivors at the center. To take advantage of this opportunity, we need to take a step back. At Californians for Safety and Justice, we believe in the power of asking really simple questions. We decided to ask two questions, simple questions, that actually haven't been asked and answered enough when it comes to building criminal justice and public safety policy. The two questions we asked are, who experiences crime and violence? And what do those who are most impacted by crime and violence want from their safety and justice systems? Now, it sounds simple, but it's shocking to learn that very little of the answers to those questions have been driving public safety policy in California for the last 3 decades. So we set out to answer those questions. We started off by talking to many of you in this room, those of you on the front lines providing support to survivors, stopping the cycle of crime. We also did polling and focus groups and read research and collected data. Of all of the information that we've gathered and relationships that we've built over the last 2 years, we've developed 2 fundamental conclusions that should completely change how we build our safety and justice systems in California. The first conclusion that we've drawn based on our work with crime survivors is that crime and violence have a disproportionate impact on communities and people who have the least access to publicly funded resources and support. Most impact, least support. While 1 in 5 Californians are impacted by crime, 2 in 3 of those Californians are impacted by repeat crime. Not just once, but 2 in 3 have experienced crime more than once in the last 5 years. And many have experienced cycles of victimization that go much further back in their lives. Who is repeatedly victimized by crime and violence in California? Well, its impact is disproportionate. What we've learned is that our community members from low-income communities, communities of color, our youth, are most likely to be repeatedly impacted by crime and violence. When it comes to violence in California in particular, our young men of color, especially African American and Latino, are the most vulnerable to be victimized by these crimes. So what kind of resources do those who are disproportionately impacted have access to? Well, what we've learned is very little. In fact, 2 out of 3 people who've been repeatedly victimized by a crime had no access to recovery supports in the aftermath of that crime. This information, that the most impacted have the least access, should shock the conscience of every Californian. The very system that is designed to protect those who are vulnerable to victimization has completely missed the mark. Crime survivors need access to trauma recovery, access to shelters, transitional housing, mental health treatment, drug treatment, access to economic recovery supports. Those recovery strategies and supports are not available at the rate they should be. We have to transform that. The second conclusion that we've drawn, based on our work with crime survivors, is that those who are most impacted by crime and violence prefer a justice system that can stop repeat cycles of crime over tradition. Those who are most impacted by crime and violence don't actually want a justice system that's a one-size-fits-all prison-first approach. In fact, we've done polling and research and all kinds of supports, and what we found is that 2 out of 3 survivors of crime think that the current approach to criminal justice, where we put more and more money into prisons, does nothing to impact repeat cycles of crime, does nothing. In fact, what crime survivors want is money invested into the strategies that are going to stop repeat cycles of crime. Rehabilitation, probation, community supervision, victim-centered justice. These are the things that are missing from our public safety strategy. Traditionally, we've understood punishment as synonymous with supporting crime victims. What we know today is that that's not true. We've missed the mark. Well, that's why we organized today's conference. That's why it's called Survivors Speak. Because now more than ever, it's time to build a new safety movement for California. We need a new safety movement that abandons the old assumptions of the past, that abandons the old notion that prison-first policies protect and serve victims. We need to invest in a new safety movement that puts victim-centered justice and puts the needs of crime-impacted communities at the center. So that's what we're about at Californians for Safety and Justice, and that's why we decided to pull this conference together. Survivors Speak, we call it that because you're going to hear from crime survivors about what survivor-centered justice looks like. You're going to hear from crime survivors about how to recover from trauma. You're going to hear from crime survivors about transformational justice, about healing, about building health in our communities. This is the safety movement that we need, and that's why we called you all here together with us today.